Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will delve into a new case, the case of Bridgett Frisbie. Bridgett Frisbie was born in December 1993 in Katy, Texas, USA. Shortly after her birth, her parents abandoned her, and she was placed in an orphanage. When Bridgett was 18 months old, Robert Frisbie and Catherine visited the orphanage. After years of trying without being able to have children, they decided to make Happy the baby abandoned by her parents. Catherine had always longed for a daughter, and from the moment she first met Bridgett, she felt a deep connection. Without hesitation, Robert and Catherine decided to adopt Bridgett. From then on, they providing Bridgett with a family full of love and protection. Bridgett was an active and kind-hearted child. From a young age, she developed a passion for horseback riding, poetry, and painting. Her positive and friendly nature helped her make many friends. Her adoptive parents often wondered how her biological parents could have abandoned such a wonderful child. However, despite her cheerful demeanor, Bridgett faced significant challenges throughout her life. When Bridgett was 10 years old, her adoptive mother passed away after battling a long-term illness for several years. Despite always being cared for and encouraged by family, Catherine's death was a devastating loss for Bridgett, who had seen Catherine as her real mother. During this difficult period, father and daughter grew closer, supporting each other as they navigated their grief. Robert deeply loved his daughter, and over the years, they built a warm and trusting relationship. As Bridgett grew older, her rebellious nature became more and more evident. Robert struggled to keep up with her boundless energy, but she continued to embrace life with enthusiasm. Despite their differences, they maintained a close and loving relationship. Bridgett was an active and lively student. She excelled academically and had ambitious dreams for the future, much to her father's delight. She aspired to attend college and build an independent life. On April 3, 2011, a group of teenagers were riding motorcycles along the edge of a Texas forest. This was a strip of land planted near the family's home. The area was usually used for riding dirt bikes and ATVs. Towards the end of the trip, the young athletes saw something suspicious off to the side of the trail. Venturing slightly into the woods, they made a horrifying discovery: a human body. Realizing the importance of preserving evidence, the group refrained from disturbing the scene. They observed blood on the girl's clothes and head, and it appeared that someone had attempted to hide the body by covering it with branches and leaves. However, the concealment was so poorly done that the body was visible even from a considerable distance. The police were immediately called to the scene, where the high school students waited for their arrival. None of the teens recognized the girl. The officers discovered that the victim had no identification, making it impossible to determine her identity at the time. During a cursory inspection of the area, the detectives assumed that the massacre had been carried out right there. The victim had been attacked and left in the forest. A forensic examination later confirmed that there were no signs of abuse violence, and all of her belongings, including valuables, were still with her. This ruled out robbery and abuse assault as motives, so they suspect that the attack was related to personal hostility or jealousy. The police immediately investigated the victim's identity. They noticed the victim appeared to be just under 20 years old. She was found lying on the ground, partially covered with branches and dirt. A large wound to the head was the only visible injury, indicating a fatal blow that killed the young schoolgirl on the spot. The wound was caused by a 9mm bullet at close range, which passed through her head. Near the body, investigators discovered an empty 9mm ammunition box. This was the only clue with which the detectives had to start searching for the culprit of the tragedy. While examining the crime scene, Investigators noticed another peculiar detail. A few meters from the body, a small patch of the forest floor had its top layer of soil removed, leaving a bare spot. It appeared as though someone had started digging but stopped abruptly. The reason for this was unclear. It was possible the killer had intended to bury the body but was interrupted or frightened away. However, the police acknowledged that this detail might have been unrelated to the girl's murder. To identify the deceased, investigators began reaching out to local residents. They went door to door, speaking with people who lived near the forest. News of the brutal murder quickly spread through the community, causing widespread concern. The police used the media to inform the public about the incident, which had occurred just a few hundred meters from some homes, leaving families horrified. Such a crime was unprecedented in their peaceful area. Residents were asked if they had noticed any suspicious vehicles or unfamiliar individuals heading toward the forest or behaving strangely. Meanwhile, deputies from the sheriff's department visited dozens of homes and interviewed numerous witnesses. However, no valuable information emerged on the first day of the investigation. Just as the officers were beginning to lose hope of finding a helpful lead, a woman from a nearby settlement provided a significant clue. She explained that the night before the body was found, she had been relaxing with friends in her backyard. Between 200 and 300 some, she heard a loud noise resembling an explosion. Her friends also confirmed hearing the same sound. According to the witnesses' recollections, that night, no one attached much importance to this extraneous noise since she lived next to a forest area and knew that it could have been hunters. Moreover, the noise seemed distant, and she wasn't even sure if it was a bullet sound. Despite the efforts of law enforcement, no additional information surfaced. The police returned to the station and began searching their database to determine if the murdered woman was listed as missing. Given the circumstances, it was likely her details had been added only a few days earlier. Unfortunately, during these checks, officers were unable to identify the victim found in the forest. The case took a turn the next day. On the morning of April 4, 2011, Robert Frisbie went to the sheriff's department to report that he hadn't been able to contact his 17-year-old daughter, Bridgett, for over a day. He was deeply concerned, especially after hearing about a body discovered in the nearby forest, not far from their home. At this time, the identity of the body remained unknown. So detectives immediately communicated with Robert. He revealed that he had been unable to reach his adopted daughter, Bridgett, through her mobile phone or social media since the previous evening. Bridgett had planned to spend the night at a friend's house 2 days before Robert reported her missing to the police. Robert believed she was mature enough to make such plans and assumed she had intended to meet her boyfriend that night. He didn't object to her having fun. However, after leaving home, Bridgett failed to contact her father. She didn't confirm her arrival, let him know how she was, or even say goodnight. This lack of communication was unusual, as their family shared a warm and trusting relationship. According to Robert, such behavior seemed uncharacteristic and caused concern. Robert was aware of an unwritten rule often followed by the police. They are unlikely to act on a disappearance reported earlier than 24 hours after the person goes missing. With this in mind, he decided to wait before going to the police station. During this time, he repeatedly tried contacting his daughter on her mobile phone and reaching out to her friends, but all his efforts were met with silence, without any clue. When Robert provided detectives with a description of his daughter, they immediately noted Bridgett's striking resemblance to the body they had found. Robert was shown photographs from the scene of the incident and heartbreakingly confirmed that it was Bridgett. She was wearing the same clothes she had on when she left home. The discovery was an emotional devastation for Robert. Years earlier, he had lost his wife to a serious illness and still deeply missed her. His daughter had been his source of hope and joy, but now that light was gone too. With this confirmation, the victim was officially identified. The police then questioned Robert to piece together the events. Robert said that he last saw his daughter on April 2, 2011, when she was still at home. He had just bought her a pair of soft, blue leggings, which she tried on before going out for a walk. That evening, Bridgett's friend, Kendall Suo, came over for dinner with the family. After the meal, the two girls asked Robert to take them to a party. He agreed, but when they arrived, they discovered that the club was closed to young people, unable to attend. Robert took the two girls home at around 10 p.m. Kendall left shortly after, picked up by another young man who planned to return home by midnight. Bridgett and Kendall had planned to go to the bus stop to meet Bridgett's boyfriend. However, Robert did not wait for the young man to arrive and went to bed. He set his alarm for midnight, and when he woke up, he found Bridgett still at home. She told him that her friend was late, which worried her. Robert reassured his daughter and told her to go to bed. After seeing Bridgett start getting ready for bed, he locked the door and went back to sleep. At around 3 Robert woke up feeling uneasy. He checked around the house and realized that Bridgett was not there, thinking she might have gone out with friends. He left the garage door unlocked so she could get inside without waking him. When he tried to call her to ask when she would be home, he realized that he couldn't find his phone. He thought that his daughter might have taken his mobile phone so as not to leave home without a means of communication. He tried using the internet and social media to contact her, but she didn't respond to his calls or messages. Concerned, Robert attempted to track his phone's location through GPS to ensure his daughter was safe, but he couldn't manage to do so. His anxiety grew as he realized she was unlikely to stick to her curfew. He decided to wait until morning, hoping she would return and resolve the situation on her own. Unfortunately, when he woke up on next day, Bridgett was still not home. Robert began calling several of her friends and contacts, but no one could tell him exactly where she was or what had happened. By that evening, he read online that a group of teenagers on motorcycles had discovered the body of an unidentified girl near his family home. This news made Robert even more anxious. Although he tried to push away the distressing thoughts, the possibility that his daughter might be the victim tormented him. The next morning, he went to the police station and confirmed that the murdered girl was indeed his daughter. The devastating news left him shattered. He became unable to sleep or focus on work, and even started keeping a loaded weapon by his bedside. After Robert's testimony, the detectives finally had their first lead. The suspect was Kendall Suo, a school friend of Bridgett's, with whom she had spoken on the evening before her disappearance. Bridgett's father stated that he had known Kendall for a long time and had never observed any signs of aggression or dangerous behavior in him. According to Robert, Kendall was a responsible high school student with no history of criminal activity or bad influences. He was well-behaved, a good student, and always treated Bridgett with respect. Her father felt confident trusting his daughter with Kendall, believing she was safe in his company. Robert was certain that Kendall could not be the killer. In contrast, Robert believed that a more likely suspect was Bridgett's ex-boyfriend, Valley Jonathan Eason. From the start, Bridgett and Jonathan had a troubled relationship. Jonathan was a bad influence and was suspected of using soft banned substance. He was frequently involved in problematic incidents and had a history of provoking conflicts. From the beginning of their acquaintance, he often displayed threatening behavior, Later, a third person came into the picture, Zach Richards, another old friend of Bridget's, with whom she had started dating shortly before her death. Based on Robert's testimony, investigators quickly identified several suspects who needed to be thoroughly investigated. Detectives immediately began questioning these young men to determine their whereabouts at the time of the murder. The first person they approached was Kendall, one of the last people to see Bridgett alive. Kendall had no prior issues with the law. When contacted by the police, he willingly agreed to come to the station and provide his statement. He confirmed Robert's account, explaining how he visited Bridget's house and then went to the club with Bridgett. According to Kendall, he left the house shortly after Robert dropped them off at the club. He claimed that their plans had suddenly changed because another friend was to join them. Kendall expressed his willingness to cooperate with the investigation and agreed to provide DNA samples and fingerprints as needed. He also mentioned that on the evening in question, Bridgett was upset due to a recent argument with her ex-boyfriend, Jonathan Eason. Bridgett and Jonathan had been in a relationship for several months, but it had been troubled from the start. Jonathan often accused her of cheating, which eventually led to their breakup. However, he seemed to hold a grudge against her and would use any chance to hurt her feelings. The situation was further complicated because they attended the same class. The police verified Kendall's alibi, which checked out. Despite this, they kept him on the list of suspects and decided to scrutinize some of his statements further. The next person the detectives investigated was Bridget's ex-boyfriend, Jonathan. Several witnesses from Bridget's close circle had mentioned him during their interviews. When the police attempted to contact Jonathan, they couldn't reach him. They decided to visit his home, but upon arrival, they found the house empty, with signs suggesting it had been abandoned in a hurry. This discovery raised serious concerns. The back wall of the family home was covered with round holes resembling bullet holes. Based on the number of holes, investigators concluded that the bullet holes were either from a semi-automatic weapon or the attacker has been deliberately impacting the front of the house for a long time. During their investigation, they discovered that about a week before Bridget's murder, Jonathan had been targeted by 3 unknown individuals in a car. They had opened attack on him, but he managed to hide in his room, avoiding injury. Following the attack, Jonathan reported the incident to the police. Despite the investigators' best efforts, the case remained unsolved. The only evidence collected at the scene were spent cartridges and several bullets. Neighbors revealed that Jonathan moved out the day after the attack, fearing for his safety. The police suspected that these events might be connected. On March 14th, the active phase of the search for Jonathan began. He became the main suspect in this case. By that time, detectives had already managed to visit the school where he studied. Bridgett also studied there. The administration reported that Jonathan had not been in class in recent days. Investigators decided to talk to other students from his class. Police officers tried to find out where Jonathan went after the attack. Detectives met Alexander Olivieri, who introduced himself as a close friend of Bridgett. According to him, they had recently met, and since then, they often communicated. Alexander immediately said that during her relationship with Jonathan, Bridgett repeatedly feared for her life and health, as Jonathan behaved aggressively. Even after their breakup, Jonathan continued to pursue her. They often saw each other at school, and Jonathan did not miss the opportunity to offend her. All this often ended in quarrels and confrontations. Bridgett just wanted to forget about the relationship and the unpleasant breakup, but her ex-boyfriend prevented this with all his might. According to Alexander, Jonathan was capable of causing harm to Bridgett. Investigators tried to find out where Alexander was on the night of Bridgett's murder. According to him, he was supposed to meet her that very night. They were going to pick up her boyfriend, Zach Richards, from the bus station. Zach was returning from visiting relatives who lived in a neighboring state. Alexander claimed that he arrived late to Bridgett's house with another friend named Alan Perez. Bridgett had promised to wait for them near the house, but he did not see her anywhere. She ignored their calls, so they left, assuming she had either already gone to bed. They met Zach and drove around the city for several hours before returning home at around 5 p.m. According to the forensic expert, by that time, Bridgett had already been killed. Alexander learned of Bridgett's death from the news. Detectives then questioned Alan, who told a similar story. However, his version slightly differed. He claimed that after meeting Zach, they played computer games all night and did not drive around the city. These discrepancies raised suspicions. Detectives added Alexander and Alan to the list of suspects, as their stories did not align, and no one could confirm their alibis. Nevertheless, Jonathan remained the main witness investigators wanted to question. Detectives quickly discovered that Jonathan's mother had not left the city after the attack on their home. Instead, she had moved in with a family friend for a while her son was sent to relatives in Austin, Texas. Law enforcement officers quickly found Jonathan's mother, who admitted that her son often got into trouble because of his bad character. She confirmed that the attack on the house was clearly directed against him, as the bullets were aimed at the side of the house where his room was. According to her, Jonathan had gotten into a fight before the attack, so the attackers were most likely connected to this incident. Unfortunately, it was not possible to prove this during the investigation. The relationship between Jonathan and his mother was far from ideal. Despite sending him to Austin, she did not keep in touch with him and did not know his exact whereabouts. However, she provided the police with an address to help them begin their search for Jonathan. Help for the investigation came from an unexpected source. Alan's lawyer approached the police and stated that his client had important information regarding the case. Alan was willing to provide this information in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Detectives considered the information potentially useful and agreed to the terms. According to Alan, there was a direct connection between Bridgett's murder and the drive-by attack at Jonathan's house. Alan revealed that both he and Alexander had joined the National Guard, where they learned how to handle weapons. After mastering basic skills, Alexander continued his education at school and met Bridgett. Bridgett confided in Alexander about her problems with her ex-boyfriend, Jonathan. Together, they came up with a solution. According to Alan, in the incident that happened at Jonathan's house, it was Bridgett who directly acted. Alex used his semi-automatic weapon, while Alan was also present in the car, but only as an observer. Unfortunately for the entire group, Bridgett started talking too much, putting everyone at risk of being exposed. On April 2, 2011, Alexander planned to meet Bridgett to confront her about how her loose talk had nearly jeopardized them all. Considering his training in the National Guard and aspirations for a career in the military, Alexander feared Bridgett's behavior could ruin his future. Meanwhile, Jonathan had already reported the situation to the police, and an active investigation was underway. Before that, after completing his training, Alexander began carrying a 9mm Beretta in a holster under his clothes. That evening, Alexander and Alan went to pick up Bridgett from her house. They convinced her to get into the car by pretending they will to pick up her boyfriend, Zach, from the bus station. Initially, Bridgett refused to go, so Alexander followed her into the house, determined to get her into the car by any necessary. While this was happening, Alan hid in the back seat of the Chevrolet Suburban, under a large blanket. Eventually, Alexander managed to persuade Bridgett to get into the car. They drove to an isolated area. On the way, Alexander started to put pressure on Bridgett and accused her of the fact that her chatter could cost them all dearly. Upon arriving at the secluded location, they walked to a nearby wooded area. Alexander brought a shovel and flashlight and, together with Bridgett, entered the forest. After some time, Alan got out of the car and quietly followed them, staying far enough behind to avoid being seen by Bridgett. According to Alan, Alexander forced Bridgett to dig, intimidating her and insisting it was urgent. While they were digging, Alexander suddenly pulled out a weapon and aimed it at the back of Bridgett's head. Alan initially thought Alexander was trying to scare Bridgett as a way of teaching her a lesson. But to his shock, Alexander pulled the trigger, killing her instantly. After the murder, Alexander hurried back to the car, taking the shovel and flashlight with him. He destroyed Bridgett's phone and discarded the weapon, likely somewhere in the forest. Alan was stunned and confronted Alexander, angrily accusing him of what he had done. However, Alexander threatened Alan, warning him to stay silent or face consequences. Alexander then took all the items involved in the murder back to his home. Later, around 4 hours, they picked up Bridgett's boyfriend, Zach, from the bus station as originally planned. That night, Alexander invited a third friend to spend the night at his place. The following day, Alexander convinced Alan to work together to create a shared alibi. They agreed to stick to their story when speaking with the police. Alexander believed this plan would deceive the detectives. To further mislead the investigation, he decided to shift suspicion onto Bridgett's argumentative ex-boyfriend, Jonathan. Alan admitted that he and Alexander had willingly participated in an attack at Jonathan's house to help Bridgett. However, Alexander hadn't anticipated that Bridgett would telling others about the incident. According to Alan's confession, Alexander saw no other solution than to kill Bridgett to protect his future. Later, investigators questioned Zach, Bridgett's boyfriend. Zach confessed that he had known about the attack at Jonathan's house. He also confirmed that Bridgett had started sharing the story with others. Bridgett had even considered posting about it on social media to intimidate Jonathan, which enraged Alexander. He repeatedly begged Bridgett to drop these plans, but she refused to listen. On the evening of the meeting, Zach knew Bridgett was supposed to arrive with 2 friends, but when the car arrived, she wasn't in it. When asked about Bridgett's whereabouts, Alexander said he couldn't reach her. A few days later, Zach learned of Bridgett's death. Alexander Olivieri was immediately arrested, and during a search of his home, police were unable to find the weapon believed to have been used in the car attack, as well as the weapon used to kill Bridgett. However, they did find instructions for a weapon model that matched the shell casings discovered at the crime scene. Investigators also recovered a shovel that Bridgett had used to dig a hole in the forest before being shot. Her DNA was confirmed to be on it. A thorough inspection of Alexander's car revealed numerous fabric fibers. However, Alexander never admitted to his actions. Instead, he attempted to shift the blame onto Alan. At this time, the prosecutor's office presented strong evidence disproving his claims. During the investigation, video recordings from 2010 were uncovered, showing Alexander demonstrating his use weapon skills with the same type of weapon used to kill Bridgett and in the attack at Jonathan's house. FBI agents took an active part in the investigation. A few days before the trial, they presented the results of fiber analysis conducted on materials collected from Alexander's car. The fibers matched the artificial fur on the victim's clothing. Bridgett had been wearing a bright and distinctive outfit, making it easy to trace the source of the fibers. Additional evidence has strengthened the case against Alexander. Alexander's lawyer advised him to remain composed during the trial. He chose not to testify and never confessed to the murder. His cold demeanor made him appear calculating and unfeeling. On August 1, 2012, Alexander was found guilty and sentenced to 60 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Bridgett's father deemed the sentence fair and expressed hope that Alexander would never be released. As promised by the police, Allen was not prosecuted for any of the incidents described.